everyone to a new episode of the Haptics Club podcast. I'm Eric from Haptics, and I'm joined by our Haptics crew. Today they're not here, but they usually are. There's Manu from Unity, Ashley from Titan Haptics, Sarah of Haptics, and Heise and Irina from Sensigrove. The Haptics Club is a team of people that have a passion for haptics. Our goal is to raise awareness of the amazing tech and people in haptics, and to foster interesting discussion on the subject. We are so happy to have been able to contribute to the space together for season 3 or 4, we never remember, of the Haptics Club with even more surprises and exciting guests. Today we have Elisa Santella from Grewus. There's much to learn and talk about, so we'll start off this chat as we do with some questions to get to know our guest. We'll then take a deep dive in her expertise and of course include some questions about the challenges and opportunity on haptics from her perspective. Timing-wise, we will divide the hour in 5 minutes intro, 15 minutes for the area of expertise, 10 minutes for the future of haptics. At the 30 minutes mark, we stop the recording and open up the floor for the audience to ask your questions to the guest. So be ready. To anyone listening to our podcast, you're missing out, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Haptics Club and sign up to our newsletter that's linked into its Twitter handle. We also have a website, so www.thehapticsclub.com, where you will see all the future events. Starting with this, let's talk about haptics here. So, Elisa, it's a pleasure to have you here. So, please introduce yourself and tell us what's your background.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the introduction. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. And a little bit about myself. So my name is Elisa Santella. I'm one of the 2 managing directors here of the company Grewus. And what we are mainly doing is integration of active haptic feedback in all applications. And my background especially is I'm one of the founding members of the Grewus in 2007. I started my, I would like to say career in the automotive industry. And so I know a lot about the requirements of the automotive OEMs, as well as, of course, my team also have. I'm focused on automotive not only because I love cars, so we just talked about Eric, and so we started as a component supplier for the automotive in the acoustic, and now we are doing exactly the same. So we are providing their customers with active haptic solutions and actuators at the end, and we do a good job like colleagues. So because we know the requirements and we know the disciplines and we know how it is not easy to integrate as well as active haptic and acoustic feedback in application. We support our customers and my team, especially with all the technical guys. And I'm a little bit more focused on the commercial side, where we help the customers to integrate active haptic feedback. So that would like to say this is the key point. So we are solution providers.
Okay, thanks for sharing. So you mentioned a little bit that you started as an acoustic company, right? And you moved to haptics. When did you realize that opportunity and how that pivot, let's say, in some way or form, happened?
Thank you for your question. So it is as we are from the acoustics, so we know a lot about 2 technologies. There are electromagnetic and piezoelectric based technologies. So we started in 2015, 2016. We started with the haptics. This was some kind of idea from one of our customers at that time. So we talked about exciters and voice coils because they're technology electromagnetic based, and we talked about projects about acoustics and how to integrate it as an acoustic component. And then we started to go more in detail in this technology and in the haptics. And at this point, we figure out, okay, so we have the technology, we have the know-how about the frequencies, because we are talking as well as in the acoustics and in the haptics, we are talking about frequencies. We know a lot about that, and so that was the point where I also figure out, so hey, that's a cool point and a cool thing to bring in the automotive. And as we are familiar with all the requirements in the automotive and then the household appliance, it was quite easy to see, okay, so if the acoustic component will fit in an application, so why will not do it also with the haptics? So it was some kind of starting point with one customer, and then we go through a lot of other projects.
Understood. That's a great intro. Thanks, Elisa. So I would like right now to dive deeper in your area of expertise for the next 15 minutes. So let's imagine that you're explaining this to someone new to the space. So what's the value and how is haptics can bring value in the automotive industry?
Yeah, so good question. And as I have, when you try to explain what you're doing with your family and with your friends, so you always try to explain how the technology is working and so on. But I think the best explanation is, imagine that you will reduce all the buttons in your car. Well, so what happens? So you have no buttons in your car. Maybe you only have touch screens, or you have smart surfaces or whatever. So you will miss something, because at the point where you would like to I don't know, turn on the lights, or you will change the position of your seat or whatever, you are used to have this haptic feedback. So it's a passive haptic feedback because we are talking about switches and buttons. And if you would like to have it in a future car where no buttons are inside, you will think about, okay, what I would like to feel. And in this moment, I think active haptic feedback is a good point to start and to talk about the technology itself. But I think at this point, every people will say, okay, I know it because from my smartphone, I have a feedback when I press a button where it's not a button because it is a touch display. And so this is the way I describe usually what I'm doing, because if we're talking to people who are not familiar with active haptic feedback, it's quite, it's difficult to explain what we are doing. But I think that is a good explanation how this technology, or how we will bring this technology into a car.
Great, thanks for sharing. So yeah, we like to ask these questions to multiple people so that our listener can get their own ideas about what haptics is. Everyone sees it from his side. So thanks for sharing. So one thing that is well known in the market, specifically also in automotive, I doubled myself with automotive haptics a little bit. So we know that designing great haptics product is a tedious process. This is true in every way. Chris, in a few Haptics Club ago, said this is because it's a system problem, right? So it involves mechanics, actuation, human input. So one of the big questions that always happen into the engineering is that how can we speed up this process? So, and I think this is connect a little bit with the discussion on the quantification of haptics, is what this podcast partially should focus on. So on your side, how can we speed up this process, and what are you bringing on the table to make these things happen?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. So I don't know if everybody here knows it, but you Eric, I'm chair of the Automotive Working Group in the Haptic Industry Forum, and we are especially doing this work. So we try to figure out how to standardize haptics to speed up the industrialization of haptics, as well as to reduce this development cost that you mentioned. And for this, you need some kind of design guidelines like the HD haptics, which is one of the documents and of the things their standards bring from the Haptic Industry Forum. And we are actually working on the document in regards of measuring haptic feedback. But I think to speed up, I think you need to bring all these disciplines together. So it's not not that easy. You cannot integrate an actuator in an application. For example, I would like to say in the display, for example, and I will bring in, I don't know, a piezoelectric component or electromagnetic component, and we say, okay, I can simulate everything. So that's not possible. As you said, and also Chris mentioned in the former podcast, you need to bring a lot of disciplines together. So, for example, the mechanical concept of the complete application, the acoustic performance, the haptic performance, so the acceleration on the surface, and the driving of the actuator. All these things you need to bring together, and it's not easy. You cannot simulate all these things and say, okay, I will bring it in, and then I will I have a acceleration at the end and say, oh, I have 5G on the surface. Nice, I achieve my goal. That's not that easy. So that's the reason why I think I think, and a lot of people are also familiar with those things, because if you would like to implement design guidelines, that will be a first step, or to introduce documents like the Haptic Industry Forum is doing with the standards. That makes the first step in a project much easier. But to reduce this development costs and to say, I would like to bring all those things on some kind of simulation software, that is not that easy. And that's also the reason why quantification, it's always depending on so many disciplines. And I think that's the biggest goal that we have in the haptics, is to bring all these things together in some kind of network. And I don't know if this answered the questions well, but I think the point is that you cannot simulate everything in the haptics, because there are so many different parameters and characteristics you need to bring together.
I mean, you burned through my next question, so that's
No.
fine. So, I mean, to recap a little bit, I think you mentioned that, okay, one value would be to actually document best practices. And this is something the Haptics Industry Forum is doing. Who doesn't know, Haptic Industry Forum is an industry association about haptics. So if you're interested, check it out or contact Elisa. The second items would be to quantifying these pieces of the chain. So that involves the acceleration mechanics, humans, and interfacing, so that you have pretty much like, let's say, audio video references on how to build the complete stack and not be just dependent on, let's say, you change ERM for, I don't know, voice coils, and you don't know what's going to happen, because if you have an idea on what's all the chain, that you have a pretty good idea on what's going to happen. And the third one is that how much these things can be simulated. So Elisa mentions we are far away because we don't have nailed down the single processes. Maybe in the future, more finger processes are nailed down, more we can simulate, so even more reduce. Did I summarize it well, Elisa?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think another good example would be if we are talking about an ERM, for example. So we are talking about a component and well-known technology and actuator. And if you're talking about the specification of one component, so the ERM itself, you have some kind of specification. You have frequency range, you have acceleration, you have mass, and so on. But how to bring this technical specification in an application where I can put an ERM, for example, in a steering wheel, as well as in a gaming pad, as well as in a sex toy or whatever. So all these things can't be, I would like to say, simulate. That's the reason why we need to go in deep analysis in one application.
Okay, understand. So that's about being haptics has to be specific applications driven. Okay. You mentioned a little bit about this quantification for haptics, specifically in the automotive market, because that's where your big area of expertise come from. If I understood correctly, you came from passive haptics, so coming from buttons, and then right now you went to haptics, so it means simulating buttons with actuation, right? So how much of that finding and expertise can be exported to other fields? So gaming, VR, mentioned sex toys. So is there a large overlap that you can bring in these markets and helping to implement the guidelines and or having this accelerated engineering process, or you need to basically start from scratch because it's a completely different application?
It really depends. If we are talking about vibrotactile haptic feedback and we are talking about a surface, then we can maybe extract some of the things where of the for example of the parameters of the characteristic of one one application in the automotive, for example, the display or whatever. Then we can extract some of this information, some of this parameters, physical parameters, and we can put in another application, maybe a trackpad in a computer, but to put it in, to extract it and to put in, for example, in a sex toy, completely other way how to quantify and how to measure and how to specify and how to write down some kind of book of requirements. This is not that easy. So that's the reason why you always need to consider the application with the actuators and the surface and so on. So it's you cannot combine the things.
Understand. So basically, if I can rephrase, is that if there is a similar human-machine interaction action involved, in this case, if there is a surface and you interact with the surface, there is something that can be brought upon because fundamentally the human's loop is the same. However, if the human loop changes, in the case sex toys, in the case VR controller or gaming controller, then you need to restart from scratch because the human intention and is different. So you have to reconsider everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good way to put it, and it's good that there is some overlap there. It makes a lot of sense. So and let's change a little bit subject here. So what makes this haptic space so exciting to you, so that you're spending, I know, it's a lot of your professional life on that?
I think creating something that actually is not available, I think that makes things really challenging. Or for me, especially, I love challenges. So really to create something new and to be part of new things will come in the future. So I think we will talk about future in also during this podcast. But I think being part of new technology and to implement this technology in for example in automotive, for me is automotive the most important because yeah, as I said, I love cars and I love to be part of this community and to know people designing haptics and to bring our ideas and to bring my ideas or the ideas of my team and how to integrate it in future cars. This is something is really challenging, and be part of this community and be part of this trends, because active haptic feedback is something is known from gamepads or is known from the PS5 or whatever, and you know it from other points, but on the other application. But to bring this in a car, in a in new surfaces, in new application, new ideas, this is something is really very cool, and I really like it because there are some ideas right now with our customers, and because of NDA, as you know, I'm not allowed to say a lot of things about that, but there will come a lot of new things about smart technologies, new ideas, how to integrate it in surface where at the moment you will not think about. And that makes things really very interesting and challenging from the side of the actuator. So as we are actuator supplier at the end, but also to be part of this trend and of this technology and this community and this network, because at the end, haptics is all about networking. You need to know people who are able to do sensing, and people who are doing the software and the driving and the actuators, and to bring all these people together and to talk with really experts this is really very cool, and I really like this networking idea, and to bring the people together, like HIF or Haptic Industry Forum being part of this, or Euro Haptics or Smart Haptics or whatever. So meet people there who also have the same passion for this technology, and to have the same goals and the same targets and the scope. So that's challenging. Is something where I say, okay, that's cool to be part of this community.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And I know that most of the people in haptics are there because it's you're passionate about it. If you would do it mostly for money, just do something else, probably better. Maybe in the future will be a bit somewhere in the market, but right now it's still say partially passion driven. So let's right now jump in our most popular section, which is really the future of haptics. So the idea in this stage is really don't be afraid to be wrong. I mean, this is the point. Predictions are 95% wrong, maybe 99% wrong. And what we are trying to capture here is what is the feeling of the insiders about the haptics future. And we hope that through this podcast, also people who are interested can understand where things are going. So then where do you see haptics in 5 to 10 years in your domain, so specifically automotive haptics?
Yeah. So I love this part of the podcast. As you said, nothing is wrong or everything is wrong. I personally think that there, especially in automotive, for the next 5 to 10 years, we are really talking about smart surfaces, and we are talking about designers. So these are the two main topics I would go a little bit more in detail. So one of this part is the smart surfaces. So everything what's now only a surface with leather and plastic and whatever will be smart in the future, and you will have functions in your car which you won't imagine right now, or which be integrated in much more nice ways and designed much better. And why I say designers and designs, that's I personally think, and I talk with a lot of designers in the automotive, and I think they will integrate haptics more and more in the future, and they will more think about how it feels if I press a button. So now we have a specific way of thinking how a button should feel like, but I think designers will go in other directions with their haptics analysis, and with their thinking how also the cockpit of the future should feel and look like. So I personally think that designers will work much closer with engineers to design new haptic sensations in a car for smart surfaces or for displays. So till the moment we will have this haptic feedback for as an information center, as an information part of the car. In the moment where we are talking about entertainment in the car, because we have autonomous driving, and we will not, it's not needed anymore to feel a switch if I don't know, if I would like to start the heating of my car or whatever. Then we are talking about entertainment, and then we are talking about complete other ways how haptics will maybe feel in the car. But I think for the next 5 to 10 years, so before starting really autonomous driving of the cars, I think this designers and smart surface in the car will be much more focused on how the car of the car of the future should feel, and a switch maybe should feel, or a smart surface should feel. And this is something I think will be very interesting also for us as the supplier of the actuator, because what are the requirements we will maybe receive from these people. And so I think that designers will be much more focused on other ways of haptic sensations.
Well, let me build on this. How about, if you have autonomous driving, right, you don't need haptics, right? Some of the reason why which haptics was in automotive, at least when I was meddling with that, 2015, something like that, was about security, right? Is that, okay, touchscreens are great because they, for design perspective, is fine. You bring on your interaction frameworks from telephones, so it's much better. They look sleek. It's easier to make a clean car. Cool. Problem is I need to check if I have a confirmation, so I have to put haptics, so I reduce the problems. Fine. Building on this, if you don't have autonomous driving, right, in some way or form, you have the car taking over in some activities, and some other activities it doesn't take over, right? And as we all know, drivers should focus on this, on how to where the car is going. Should not be focused on what the car is telling to them. Which strategies you feel that the car could put in place to help this semi-autonomous driving, to facilitate this car-human communication, to manage this transition of I take over, you take over?
Yeah.
Do you have some ideas here?
Yeah, I think so that the word here is some kind of multimodal car or cockpit of the future. So we are talking here about haptics on parts of the body where you have contact with the car. If you don't have the hands on the steering wheel, the car is not able to communicate on the steering wheel with you, so it's not possible to give their haptic feedback, but you still have the contact with the car over the seat. So I think one of the focused parts will be haptic in seats to feel whatever will happens with the car. So you need to do something because there are an alert about collision or pedestrian or whatever. So I think haptic feedback in the car will be one of the points where you will still interact with the car. If you have, I don't know, the hands or the arms on the rest, for example, and also the armrest will be a part where you still have contact with the car and you will get maybe some haptic feedback to do something, or to maybe go back to the steering wheel and to avoid a collision, or to see if you are still in the lane or whatever. So I personally think that the contact to the body will still remain on the seat, and maybe also on the pedals if your feet is, or your foot is on the pedal, on the brake or whatever. This could be another point, but I think haptics through the seat will still remain also in 10 years when they start the autonomous driving. And as you said, the focus is to not to distract the driver from the car, still to communicate, that the car still needs to communicate to the driver. So also audio, voice control, gesture control, all those things will come, or will be much more focused for the future cars. But for the haptic feedback, I think it will still remain in the seat.
Thanks, Elisa. I mean, I'm a huge fan of, let's say, the private communication channel between haptic-enabled objects and humans, like Apple Watch. I mean, I can distinguish notifications right now. Good job, Camille. So, Camille from Apple.
Yep.
So you can distinguish them. I understand what's going on through the fact that I learned this haptics language that comes from my Apple Watch, right? So, and we know that different automotive has different like touch feeling languages within their car, right? Do you feel that that would you say that would be a challenge for the future, because every automotive supplier will build their own haptic language for helping the user? Or do you feel that in some way or form they will agree on some, let's say, patterns and the design guidelines to avoid the clear problem? You rent a car, it has haptics, and you don't understand anything because you're not used to that. But that's dangerous, actually, because
yeah, it is.
that's important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that is really a challenge because every OEM has an own idea, and designers and the people also psychologically will see this problem, has another idea how to solve it and how to do this feedback. And I hope that they will find a way to find the standards, and I hope that for example, in the haptic industry forum or on other ways, they will figure out some kind of common understanding about how it should feel if I have a real alert, and or if I have, I don't know, a pedestrian or whatever. So I hope they will find some kind of common understanding about this. But as all the car manufacturers are different and they have their own ideas how to do things and how to design things, I think it's really challenging.
I mean, I agree with you. However, I think in these cases, this is a critical application. I mean, critical means if you don't do it well, you can generate accidents, right? So I think this is one of the, it's much more similar in some way of terms, from my perspective, like in telerobotics for nuclear application, right? Because that you need to manipulate from far away, but that's a critical application. If you have problems, it generates a lot of problems and it's probably highly regulated. So yeah, I think it's a good challenge, and it will be interesting to see how it evolves from market forces versus regulator, because I think if regulators see this potential danger, they will jump in, right? Oh, this is not acceptable in this way. We need to find, like, steering wheel is a steering wheel. Tesla tried to put the yoke, probably in Europe will never be sold because it's not round, right? So because that's more or less, and we see also different geography.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have some comments, please.
Yeah, no, it's only because I know there are some regulations already. For example, this functional safety in the car. So you need you need both. So you need the kappa sensing and the force sensing, and this is also some kind of regulation which is still in the market, and it's is something where it is really common to have. So there's a regulation for this. Maybe will come another regulation exactly for what you say. So yeah.
That's cool. So let's jump back in. So we reached our 30 minutes mark here. So which means we are stopping the audio recording right now, and it's time to open up the floor for the questions. So whether you're here in the Teams, please, or raise your hands, I will give you mic, or type your question into the chat. I will read it through. For anyone listening to our podcast, you're missing out on the Q&A portion. Usually it's one of the best ones because then the author and the speaker can go more in depth about what he's sharing. Haptics Club, of course, happens every 2 weeks, in the first day, and same time. So just a quick reminder, you can follow us on Twitter or on LinkedIn. We have our newsletter that will advise you on what are the next events, and I just posted on the chat our website as well as our Discord channel, newly launched. So we want to build a community of haptics aficionados from whatever way or form. We have a lot of academics, we have a lot of professionals inside. We just launched it, and that will be our primary focus to discussing it. Former speaker are there. There is David Parisi. There is a lot of other people, and you can also discuss with us. And for the next meeting, I will be on the other side, we'll be speaking, because we are going to present a book, which is called XR Haptics Implementation and Design Guidelines book, that will be authored by Chris Woodrick, CTO of Immersion, me, Heis, which is the Chief Product Officer of SensiGlove, and Rafael Pizeski, which is the CTO of Actronica. And we interviewed the highest expert in the world on haptics and gathered their tips and put it with our own expertise to give implementation guidelines for people that would like to use haptics in XR and are not expert. So next week we'll be focused about that. I will switch place with Elisa, and this is the only time that I'll be on the other side. To our listener, if you have questions, please share them now. And for our podcast listener, I salute you, and to the next time.